That was their pace, one blast a day. That's what they were good for. For quite a while, until this guy came along, the pneumatic drill. This changed the game completely. Now they could do 4 blasts a day. So it's a huge step as far as progress goes. But it came with a big price. This thing's pounding through the mountain face so vigorously that most of the rocks are silica-based, and the silica particles are flying through the air. The guys are breathing them in and getting silicosis. Consequently, they start dying off. Nobody could last more than 5 years. That was it. By the time, if you stayed on the job for 5 years straight, that was pretty much the end of it. You were going down. You weren't getting up. Consequently, a lot of guys would get out of the game after a couple of years, keep their fingers crossed they still had their health intact. They could make enough money in 2 years to pretty much set their families up financially, where they wouldn't have to worry about anything. That was their main concern. The doctors at the time were looking into it, of course, to try to figure out if they could, remedy it in some way. And a curious thing happened. They discovered that the guys that were the heaviest smokers were lasting the longest. They had the most resistance because the tar was building up in their lungs, and it was catching the silica particles before they could circulate in the lungs and do their damage. So they were pretty much telling young guys getting into wanting to be pneumatic drill operators, smoke 2 packs a day, keep your fingers crossed, that's about as good as it got. Say your prayers. It was a different world back then. Things were just harder and tougher all the way around. These are the stairs that lead all the way up to the stomp room. There's 95 stairs. They wind their way up. It's pretty easy to follow. There's one particular staircase that's a little bit steep. It's got 22 stairs in it. So take your time going up there. Anybody that thinks they might need a little extra time, like myself, I got a really bad knee, so I go up 1 step at a time. I'm usually the last one up there. Stay to the back, and we'll, go up slowly. Eventually, we'll all meet up there. On these braces right here, these actually go down into the concrete 40 feet and then 60 feet this way. Took a year and a half to pour all this concrete. You can see how it's lighter. It's super hardened. The only thing this can compare to is military grade stuff. They make bunkers out of super hard bunker. These things will probably be here 1,000 years from now. Every single person that was employed here at the mill before they accepted their position, whatever it was, the chemist, blacksmith, whatever it was, they were told this. And this is the part that always gets everybody's attention. If you accept the job, your first week is going to be life-altering. The first couple of days you're on the job, your ears are going to bleed, you're going to be in some serious pain. By the end of the week, the pain will have subsided, but your hearing is going to be irreversibly gone. You're going to be deaf for the rest of your days. And even with that facing them, there was no shortage of men looking to be employed here. They didn't just hire any old body. You had to be a journeyman, pretty esteemed in your trade or your craft at the time to be considered. It was hard to get in here. Like I said, guys were just cut from a different cloth back then. They were hard. They would, you know, put up with stuff that would just be unheard of in today's world. I mean, how many people would answer a job ad where you're going to go deaf after your first week? I don't think they'd have any takers. But back then, it was a different environment. The stamps would be banging away so loud that the county seat of government used to be here in Clear Creek County, but there was just too much commotion going on. They couldn't conduct business, so they had to move it to Georgetown. It was a lot quieter there. That's what the people that lived in the surrounding areas put up with back then. But they, the mill pretty much was the engine that drove the economy of the area, so it was just the price they had to pay. We're going to head out and head to the left. You're going to go past a small row of office buildings. The very last one, the doors are open, that's the power station. We'll meet up in there. And you can either come around this way or dip under it, whatever you want. All this stuff this big boy would have provided power and ventilation throughout the whole tunnel, all 4.2 miles. There would have been an electric motor in the back there with a canvas fan turning this giant wheel, which would have turned these pistons, pumped these pistons back and forth to ventilate the whole tunnel, the whole 4.2 miles. I used to think, well, about 2 months ago I had a guy who was on the tour, and he was an older guy, and when he was a young man, he worked with this machine. He was in charge of the maintenance of it. He knew every nut and bolt on it. So he kind of set me straight on a couple of things. I used to think that this big port here was for the ventilation, and these smaller ones took care of the power. And he told me that this whole piston here was just for ventilation. The other one was for the power. And I looked at this thing every day for months and months, and I never noticed it. But this one is actually half the size of this one. Maybe it was because it had the head off there, but I never really picked up on it. But it is exactly half the size. And that one takes care of all the power, all the pneumatic power, the carts, drills, everything. And this one's solely dedicated to the ventilation. This thing was slated to be sent away for the war effort also. They came up here to take it away one day. You can see they unbolted it, was ready for transport. And the crane they sent couldn't pick it up, it was too heavy. They said they were going to come back with a bigger crane, never showed up, and it's been sitting here ever since. They say if this thing was still running, If it was maintained, it would still be running today. Meaning that when they made stuff back then, the friction tolerance was so small that if you just kept it oiled, it would literally run forever. And I kind of believe it. I had an experience. I used to work in the Empire State Building, and it was about a year after 9/11, so everyone was, a little bit jumpy. And I came out of my office one day in the afternoon, and they were doing maintenance there, and I thought that was a little odd because normally they did in the evening. So I wanted to see what was going on. So I go in there, and the first thing that caught my attention was this turbine bolted to the concrete floor, like with those metal bolts. And I said, man, couldn't they update the equipment a little bit? This thing looks like it's, from really far back. He said, that turbine's been in there since they opened the building in 1930. It's never been opened up. It's never been worked on. All they do is oil it. He said in the evening they listen to it for about 10, 15 minutes every night to make sure it still, sounds good, everything sounds normal. And it's never even been broken down. Would not be surprised if that thing's still running today. They had that way of building stuff where it just never was metal on metal. It was just flowing. I guess that's a skill loss, but we're going to head into the tunnel now. Before we do, grab a hard hat. We'll need those to get in.
Oh yeah. That's what I wanted to see. That was on the video. Send me the picture later.
Yeah.
You can send me the picture later.
Never changes.
Yeah, send me that.
All the way back.
That's crazy that this reminds me of that show.
Yeah?
Starlink.
That's just I don't know what causes it exactly, but anywhere in the world that will be the case. If you go and it's not a lot either, it's only like 7 feet down or something like that. Right, it's not like you gotta go down hundreds of feet, where it's the same temperature all over the globe, no matter where you go. Come on, we can go all the way in. This is the original tunnel that they started digging in 1893. So the first 150 feet of it. So you know they used that little drill and little like that. And the little girl mentioned that she felt unsafe in tunnels. You see all these braces here? Every couple of feet there's a brace. They're only supposed to be every 100 feet. They're to ensure that the one layer of rock connects to the next layer. There was a graduating class at the Colorado School of Mines, and we let their students come in here practice putting those things in, just so they could have on-the-job experience. And they must have put 100 of them in, so this little area in tunnel is probably the safest little 150 feet anywhere in the world. So this tunnel goes all the way back, 4.2 miles, straight through to Central City. Back then, Central City was known as the richest square mile on the face of the earth. There was more gold coming out of Central City than anywhere else on the face of the earth. This tunnel was like a beehive of activity. It was constantly in motion. You had rails going down this side, water draining down the middle. In the morning, the guys would come and hop in the empty ore carts and head down to Central City to mine their claims. Carts and carts would be taken out a ton at a time. Just about 1 ton of ore would fit in a cart, and they were coming out of here non-stop all day long. The water draining by itself, no pumps, no help needed. Gravity took care of that whole show. Would drain right through the middle of the tunnel, and it would drain effortlessly all day long. So basically it was a gravy train. Everybody was happy, everybody was making a ton of money. Things couldn't have been better. The mill ran like that nonstop for 36 and a half years. Then the Second World War comes. Kind of puts a slowdown on things in a big way. First of all, when the government comes in and they requisition equipment, it's not like they say, okay, we're taking this, this, and this. They come in, the equipment that they requisitioned was old anyway, it was antiquated by 1943. It was going to be replaced anyhow. The stamps were antiques by then. There was newer stuff out that would get the job done without waking everybody up in a 12-mile radius. So they were anxious to get the new stuff hooked up and get in, part of the production. They also wanted to replace the ball mill. That was old and antiquated. You'll see that on the way down. So they had a big meeting of the mines. They drew up a game plan. They were going to get production back up to the old days where it used to be in full swing. First order of business, they purchased the Kansas Borough series of mines all the way down in Central City. This had a 1,200-foot mine shaft that was totally flooded. But it also had 2 stopes attached to that mine shaft. A stope is like an opening, like a big bubble inside the mountain. And these 2 stopes were full of water also, in addition to the shaft. So, the first thing they planned to do was drain the mine shaft. They can't send guys in there to start working if the thing's full of water. So, there was 40 feet of solid rock separating the far end of the tunnel to the borough's mine shaft itself. And what they planned to do was, instead of drill through the 40 feet, they intended to blast out 20, and then they would only have to drill through 20 feet. So it sounded like a very effective plan on paper. Now, whatever really happened, nobody's not 100% sure. Either they used too much dynamite or they underestimated the billions and billions of gallons of water under pressure there in the stopes. Whatever the reason was, they did the blast that day, and immediately the remainder of the wall gave way and caved in. The water came flooding in here, shooting out of this tunnel like a giant nuclear-powered fire hose for 7 full hours. Literally shot across Route 70, wasn't even on the drawing board back then. Was hitting off there. All the supports that go in the tunnel, the wooden, pretty much support beams all the way through that ensure the integrity of the tunnel all the way down the whole 4.2 miles. All of them came shooting out of here like giant wooden torpedoes. It literally hit with such force that it actually diverted the natural course of Clear Creek. Used to run up there. If you look at it from above, it looks like a horseshoe right around here from the pressure coming off the ridge over there, pushing it all the way down. It actually diverted Clear Creek from where it normally flows to where you see it today. That's how much pressure was coming out of here. All the support beams were gone. All the rails were torn up. The ore cars were shooting out of here at an estimated over 400 miles an hour. 3 days after the disaster, the government inspectors came in, took one look around, and declared the whole area unsafe. The tunnel unsafe all the way through, all the way to the end. All the mine shafts totally unsafe. Closed the doors, never to reopen again. I'm sure. You have a question?
What year was it?
That was January of 1943. I'm sure they had plans to reopen maybe a few months, a year down the road, whenever they could comply with safety regulations, but it was never to be. When they closed the doors, that was it. That was the end of the game. Gravy train stopped. During the years of production, almost 37 years, the Argo was known for one big thing, that it was able to actually extract 90 to 95% of the gold in the ore that came from Central City. Now, this was low-grade ore, you gotta understand. They weren't working with the high-grade stuff. That would usually go directly to the smelter. You've got to smash through a ton of ore, sometimes just to get a little couple of grains. You never know. They were dealing in total volume. So they had to smash through tons and tons and tons, hundreds of tons a week to get 2.6 trillion, but they did it. There was two main parts to that equation. One, of course, was even though it was low-grade ore, it was pretty good low-grade ore. It was very high producing low-grade ore, but the second part of the equation was what the Argo did to make that happen. The different chemical processes that they put the ore through to extract such a crazy amount of gold out of it. And that's what I'm going to show you on the way down, how they went about that step by step and the different things that they did. At the end of the day, they had 95% of the gold. Just to give you a comparison, any mill operating at the time, if they were able to achieve 55 to 60%, that was gold, and they were really out in front of the pack at 60%. We were so far out in front that you couldn't even see it. We were so far ahead, it was ridiculous. Even today, if a gold mill can get 90 to 95%, they're really doing well. And we were doing that with regularity over 125 years ago. So it was quite a feat. And on the way down, I'm going to explain exactly how they did that. Major flood. That's when the government declared this a Superfund site. That bulkhead is 5 feet thick. It holds back about between 4 and 4.5 feet of water on any given day. It fluctuates. It goes all the way back to Central City, the whole 4 feet, all the way back. It's not under any pressure. It's on no danger of busting through that 5-foot thick bulkhead. But the government does supervise the site. That's what that means. They actually take this water drains. It's kind of quiet today. Normally you'll hear it rushing in at about 700 gallons a minute to that water filtration plant right there in front, where they process the water, and they actually extract 8,000 pounds, 2 tons a week of solid metal out of the water that they treat before they release it into Clear Creek. You can see rafting going on in Clear Creek, plenty of fishing, good healthy marine environment, and that wouldn't be there if the water just flowed directly into Clear Creek. It would be pretty foul, a lot of sulfur, and you know how that stinks, that stuff. So they clean it up, they make Clear Creek a vibrant, marine environment right now, and there's 10 of these water filtration systems all throughout the state of Colorado. Anywhere there was mining, by a natural water source, they put one there. So Colorado does a good job of keeping their, environment pristine. I'm kind of new to the state, so I, appreciate all that stuff, and they're really on top of their game here. Every 3 months they come in and they change every 3rd bolt in there, just to ensure there's a rotation. Not that on this side anything's going to happen, but on the other side, you got that water that's corrosive, so they want to make sure no surprises from the other end there.
So what is it that makes this a Superfund site then? What are they really concerned about otherwise?
Well, they're concerned with when the water seeps through just naturally through the mountain and collects behind there, it takes a lot of solid metal out of the mountain into the water. And that's what they're concerned with, because they don't want to release that right into Clear Creek. And that's what they take out of right here in this plant right here in front of us.
So you wouldn't recommend us drinking out of that water?
Definitely not. Don't even touch it. And don't open that door, whatever you do. They went right up to the stomp room, where it's falling through a hopper right down under the 1,000-pound hammers, where it's getting smashed. So it goes in all right on the 1,000-pound hammers. We're now
Troubles.
small bar-sized pieces to work with. All the metal you see here is big giant engine blocks, and you can see the way the numbers were welded were flushed all the way down, 30 miles downstream, all the way to Golden. They were retrieved and brought back here. That's how much water pressure was coming out of there to flush these big, giant, heavy objects 30 miles downstream. You can imagine how much pressure there
This
was.
was down by where we start climbing up to the top, or the airplane. This is the water pressure.
Again, the ore is coming out of the chutes, falling down, and you got to remember the stomps are going and going and going. This thing is loud, man, and it's smashing the ore into sizes roughly this size to marble-sized pieces. And this is a model of the stump, just to give you an idea of how they work. See, she's covering her ears. And these are empty coffee cans. You can imagine 1,000-pound hammers. The cans would go up, lift the stump up, gravity would do the rest. 1,000 pounds would fall on to the ore this size, and your end result, step number one, marble-sized stones. Marble-sized pieces of ore. It's now marble-sized pieces. Next, you got to get it to the consistency of sand, and that's where this machine came in. This is the Arrastra crusher. This would have 4 350-pound weights going round and round. This thing still works. When I turn this wheel, you can actually see it turning around on the top. And you can see those gears underneath there. They're totally intact. So this would smash the ore up from marble size to sand, along with that piece of equipment down there called the ball mill. That's no longer there. But it had 300 of those 32-pound like shot puts in there going round and round and round, smashing the ore up. That was more efficient. That should actually get it like powder. So now you mix the powder, the sand, with water, soda ash, other chemicals, and make what they call slurry. So it's like a mud now. It goes from marbles to sand to powder to mud. Now you're ready to start extracting gold out of that slurry. First thing they did was cyanide leaching. That's what this 30,000-gallon vat is for. How that works is you would fill about 1/3 of that up with the slurry, approximately 10,000 gallons. Then, on that level we just came down, that's where the chemist would have been working. He would have been mixing the cyanide leaching formula. He would have been mixing that into the vat. Approximately 1/3 of that would go in. Then they would put a mixer in. A mixer was basically an airplane prop with a shaft going down the middle that would lower it from above. It would go round and round for about 48 hours. It took about 2 days for everything to come to fruition. What would happen, the cyanide would be dissolving the slurry and the gold in the slurry, turning everything to a liquid state at that point. So after 2 days of mixing, now you had about 20,000 gallons of liquid, like a dirty water. See the pipe there at the bottom? They would let the water, the liquid flow out of there through a zinc-lined filter system. A chemical reaction would occur. When the liquid gold was filtered through the zinc, it would revert back to solid metal form. Cyanide leaching still goes on today. It's very efficient. Cyanide's super cheap, and the process works extremely well. It's just not done, in big vats. A little bit more secure, the process, what they do today. Next came mercury amalgamation. These are amalgamation tables. The way they work, they would have been copper back in the day, and they would have painted a very thin layer of mercury on top of that copper. They would have poured the slurry over that. Again, chemical reactions were the name of the game. When the slurry hit the mixture of copper and mercury, it would adhere to it, would stick, and it would slowly build up and up. There's usually a tester around here, there it is. When they felt it was ready, they would take this thing, it's called a tester, and they would scrape a little bit off and put it in here. This tube is hollow, and it's really secured on here, super tight. The bottom would go to a receptacle where it would be equally as secure down there. And that was super important, because if there was any leaks out of either end, and you were unfortunate enough to breathe that in, that was it, man, not a good thing. So they would heat this up to about 2,000 degrees, and slowly the mercury would evaporate out of here and be caught down below in the receptacle down below. When it was all the mercury was evaporated, you would have pretty much solid bullion remainder in here. Now, when they were ready to do it for real, the same process would be repeated, but they would use equipment, 10,000 times this size. And the receptacle where the mercury was stored was, the vapors were actually secured in there. That was one of the earliest forms of recycling, because they would take that receptacle that it was all, the vapor was evaporated in, and send it off to the smelter once a month, and they would process it and sell it back to us. So in essence, we were using the same mercury over and over again. So that was an early form of recycling, I guess. It's a good example of being on the right track. Now, they're getting 80–85% of the gold with these processes, which is, extremely high. It's still way, way, way above what anybody else is doing. But the flotation cells put them up into the 90–95% category. They work. You can see the cells there. Each individual one is about 4 foot square, and there's a wheel at the bottom that is pumping a mixture of oil and water, oil, and a very complicated mix of other chemicals to perform what it did. It created like a froth at the bottom, like big bubbles actually. It almost looked like dish detergent, but it would actually, they were very strong. They would come right up through the slurry itself and bring the gold particles up to the surface, where they would filter it off there. So with everything going, all the processes working hand in hand and in conjunction with each other, they were able to extract 90–95% of the gold in that orbit, which was really an amazing achievement back in the day. So that's pretty much it. The story of the Argo from start to finish. I hope you guys had a little fun this afternoon, and more importantly, learned a few things. On the way back to the museum, which is right down that staircase right there, take note of that fuse box there attached to the wall. It was said that Nikola Tesla himself actually installed that. I can't tell you he did 100% because there's no paperwork to validate that. It was all lost, years ago. However, he was very active in the area. His laboratory was in Colorado Springs at the time, and he installed an identical system, wire for wire, just a year earlier in Telluride. So in all actuality, he probably was here himself with his tools hooking that thing up. So take note of that on the way down. Look around the museum, take as much time as you'd like down there, and when you're ready, let me know, and we'll go out and finish up with some gold panning, okay? All right, head right down. Don't forget to take a look at that